I do want to share my I got
Ooh,
Ooh, nice.
Walmart for like $45 and
holy jumping.
yeah, and
Cool.
so there's the
Yeah.
box, which is like I think 90s, and then here's the
Ooh,
Excellent.
nice.
The original. That
Mhm.
is just excellent.
That is a
Very cool.
beauty.
Yeah. I got a little something I'd like to share as well when you got a moment.
Okay.
Well, it's out to two. Nice.
We have a moment now.
Terrific.
Take your
Um,
moment, my friend.
Well, thank you very much. As you doubtless know, I've wanted to be, as the saying goes, in the room where it happens for a while, but the tickets for Hamilton were through the roof, at least from where I sat. Apparently, my wife thought otherwise, because this Christmas I got this nice little
Oh, cool.
envelope that
Nice.
says, "I hope you like this Christmas present." And inside the Christmas present was,
Oh,
Nice. You
That.
got tickets to Hamilton.
Nice.
Sweet.
and
Nice.
this
Good for
past January 8th, we went, and I'm here. I don't mean to be spending anybody's money, but if you can go, go. It is the energy is astonishing. It's It is like no other theater experience I have ever had. Period. If you can't see the movie, pick up Disney Plus and watch the thing on Disney Plus, because it is just nuts. The closest thing I can think of that comes anywhere near close to it in terms of just the excellence of the experience was Sweeney Todd, and Sweeney Todd was nuts. But Lin-Manuel Miranda just takes it to an entirely whole new level.
I know. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it live. I've just seen the Disney Plus version.
Yeah, which is
cast,
excellent, by the way.
Yeah, and I've probably watched that 3 or 4 times over the 2 years that it's been out, and and as people know, like, I am generally speaking not a fan of musicals just as a genre, but I mean, Hamilton just knocks me flat.
It's a different animal. It is a different animal.
Yeah. I mean, I love how, I mean, first of all, it's a fantastic story. It's really well told. It's heartbreaking, and, and really just emotionally grabs you in a really genuine way. I love the way it's staged. I love the minimalist staging of it. The way, there's not there aren't really any set changes. It's just bringing props in and out and sort of creating it with theater of the mind. And it's fantastic. Like, it's just fantastic. So I'm glad you got to see it. I'm glad you enjoyed it. That's really cool.
Oh, and there's one other thing on top of that. There's something my wife and I have been, talking about doing for a while. And that is, we are both of us going to volunteer to be what are known as redcoats. And we are going to be serving as ushers and greeters for Playhouse Square.
Cool.
And like once or twice a month, we will get to see the show for free, but we'll also be responsible for, getting the people to their seats and saying, "Watch your step, please," about a half a zillion times.
Yeah.
but this is something I know I come back to a lot, because one of the proudest things I am about Cleveland is the fact that we have the second largest theater district after New York City, and we almost didn't have it at all. This is a story I told, I know some time back, but we do have it, and just what they put up there is just astonishing, and I'm just thrilled to be a part of that.
Yeah, it sounds really good. And it reminds me of, I mean, we like, this local area doesn't really have a theater scene to speak of, especially like a professional one. But I mean, there's community theater and stuff. But one thing we do have that everybody who gives a shit about the arts in this area is Hagerstown is the home of the Maryland Symphony Orchestra. And
that's excellent that you have a resource like that near you.
Yeah. And they play in the Maryland Theater, and they have a regular yearly schedule that they do. And I haven't gotten to go to see one live since before COVID, but like you said, it's nice to have that, you know,
Yeah.
and that it's relatively well regarded as an orchestra of its size. You know what I mean? Like it's not it's something to be proud of. You know, in
Absolutely.
this, yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah,
Just
and
so
I mean,
everybody knows, if I'm yawning constantly, it's not because I'm bored. It's because it is.
Are we not
Yeah.
entertaining enough for you, Nick?
Are you not entertained?
Years.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey,
Hey, hello,
Glad you could
Azalea.
make it.
Or
I did not expect to get on the call. I just.
we still have a couple of spots
welcome.
open. Actually, I usually don't close it until we have a total of 13, so we still have a couple of spots open. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
I also brought something for show and tell. Is okay if I share it?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, go
Rock
ahead.
and
then
roll,
Sirius
shoot.
has
Is
his
that
lined up,
something-
so we'll go with him next.
It's okay. It's just some things I got with like some Christmas money and such. It's for an upcoming video, but also because I really like them. These are from the the second Avatar movie.
The Fish People movie.
The Fish People
Yes.
movie, yeah.
Yes, so this is that pleases sort of like
Oscar
creature,
nominated.
children, right?
Yeah, for best
Is that one that's
picture,
like
no
a flying
less.
fish, which would be like 45 feet long compared to like
Yes.
a human, which is pretty insane.
Hmm.
And look at this big boy.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh
No.
my god.
And look, he has the one gimpy fin, just like in the movie. Now,
Yeah.
I learned that this
Screen
that
accurate.
character. I learned that that character himself is a juvenile of his species, and that the adults grow to be 300 feet long, which is like 4 times as long as one of our largest whales. And it means that an adult version of this model would have to be 6 times the length of this thing to be accurate.
So
Dear God.
he's the
Yeah,
juvenile.
getting that in and out of the room would be
a
a chore, I
Nemo.
I guess so. He's more like an angry teenager.
That's cool.
Yeah. A last little thing. So there are these creatures in the movie called gill mantles. They're like these jellyfish-like things. They can cling to the Navi's backs and like help them move around on the water and breathe longer. I used fairy wing pieces for this minifig to simulate that creature because it wasn't included in the set. So that's the great thing about Lego. You can be creative with just like a single piece.
Yeah.
Okay, Sirius, Bob, you had your
Repurposing.
hand up for a while.
Okay, cool. I also like, Steve, that you said Sirius has his mind up, and I was like, yeah, that's
Sirius
cool.
has his mind up. Well, you always do. You're right on top of it, you know.
It's
Oh,
up
thank
for
you.
grabs.
But, so
It's, yeah, or it could mean that.
I didn't hear. What was that? I didn't hear that.
It's up for grabs, Nick said.
So a lot of people have been bugging me for quite a long time, and I was planning on doing it last year, and then so anyway, I'm planning on doing. I don't know how many I'll get done, but I want to do something for Black History Month, and put some videos out. I'm going to call them a moment in American history. Because I'm going to make the point that for all the people that get upset about Black History Month, that, well, this is American history, but you don't teach it the rest of the year. So,
Yeah.
I'm going to lay down some facts and some stuff that they don't usually teach during Black History Month, like,
Awesome.
like the, what do you call it? The summer, that one summer in
Brad Summer?
where basically they just went around and just destroyed black farms and killed a bunch of people. Most of us know about Tulsa, but there's things like that we don't know about, because when they went there, how come black people haven't come up since the end of slavery? Well,
Yeah.
Funny
because when we
story.
tried, there's been people who've actually
There's Black Reconstruction too. Yeah. But
yeah,
I'm
I
sorry.
started to record some stuff last year, and then my mom died like February 3rd, and so that kind of took the wind out of my sails, and I ended up not doing it. But it's been a year, so
Awesome. That's great news.
Well, don't bring that here to Florida, because our red man.
Yeah,
I'm
Ron
gonna-
DeSantis
I'm
will
actually-
lose his shit.
Isaiah, I
Yeah.
think I'm actually going to make a special Florida edition.
All right.
Bring up a whole bunch of shit that happened in Florida,
Please do.
and I'm going to
Just- yeah.
dedicate it. I'm going to dedicate it to what's his name? Ron
Ron
DeSantis.
DeSantis,
Governor,
yeah.
what's his name?
Or as Dr. Rashad calls him, Ron DeSatan.
Yeah.
Ron DeSatan.
Ron death sentence.
Ron death sentence. Ooh, I like that one too.
Yeah, that's good. That's
Yeah,
good.
somebody on Friendly Atheist threw that one out, and I thought it was rather apropos.
Ron
Yeah,
death
because
sentence.
life is sacred, right?
Yeah, unless you're convicted of a capital crime, and then they can't kill you fast enough.
Life
Yeah,
is
life-
sacred until you're
someone
born,
says
according to
you're
Robert.
Life, yes, life is sacred.
Out of the
until you're
womb
born.
and you're doomed.
Yes, exactly.
Like George
Michael-
Carlin said, if you're preborn, you're fine. If you're
Bold
preschool,
were
you're
prohibited.
Yeah.
On the
Michael,
Black
your hand's up.
History thing, so I had my hand up about.
Yeah. Go for it.
I was, I've been writing a neo-noir novel set in an alternate 1946 Los Angeles, and for that I was doing a lot of research into the history of LA, and was like getting mad about some of the stuff as someone who's lived in LA his whole life I never fucking heard about. And like I learned about Sugar Hill and like the jazz scene that we had in like the 40s. Like people hear about like South Central Los Angeles these days, and it's kind of infamous for how bad it is. Yeah. But back in like the 1940s, it was like a blossoming jazz scene with like really nice jazz clubs and hotels, and like, the best, some of the best jazz on the West Coast. And, because it was doing so well, like it was one of those times where the Black community was really being able to rise itself up, and they're able to afford homes. And then they started buying homes in a neighborhood called Sugar Hill. And the, banks didn't like that. And they tried to like force it out via redlining, and they took them to court, and they actually like won in court to be like, no, we get to be here. And it turned into this, blossoming Black community. And then of course we, always have to find a way to mess things up. So when they built the freeways, they were like, "Oh, where are we going to build this freeway through? Oh, this neighborhood where they're starting to do well for themselves. We're going to give them 10% of what their house is worth, declare it eminent domain." And then that of course ruined the whole jazz scene in South Central, and all the economy went to shit there. And it's like, and this is shit I've never ever heard of, living in LA my whole life. It's something that's never taught in school. Just that's like a small thing, just like the kind of shit that has been pulled on the Black community like over and over and over again, even here in supposedly progressive LA.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, I just wanted to share that because that was something I had learned, and I don't think a lot of people know about. Is like,
I didn't
well,
know.
in many ways we've
I
screwed over.
may have to include that in my series. Well, as far as LA being progressive, it is now. But remember, Ronald Wilson Reagan used to be was the governor of California
yeah.
one time.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so was Nixon.
I mean, there's a lot. That was just touching on one specific thing that I had learned about,
Yeah.
but yeah. I mean, the whole reason
I-
like Dragnet was made was because the LAPD has always been such a awful
yeah.
piece of shit
Yeah.
that they had to make a propaganda series for it.
They basically told all the like racist people that like, oh, you can't be like a racist in like the South anymore for a reason. So like, come to LA. They have actual gangs on the payroll of the LAPD. Yeah, the LAPD is awful. But Azalea James, your hand is up
Yes, your
first.
hand's been up.
I think it was first on a episode of Some More News where I had it pointed out to me like explicitly that like, for all the talk about American like values, how despite how America has failed in many ways, it's founded on some great values. Like we're often like not in public schools or whatever, not taught about these many Black Americans who actually like embodied those values. Like white people would often like fail to live up to these like the best of American values, but like speaking of Black History Month, like there's so many people out there who really like are like calling America to task to like live up to its stated values, and I feel inspired by that. I'm not Black, but I still feel proud of. I'm like proud of that. Makes me
I'd
feel
like
feels
to
a little bit better as an American to hear about these Black Americans who said and did amazing things, who deserve statues.
And just to respond to that, one of the things that I find most depressing about, I mean, I agree with everything you just said. Most depressing about where we've been over time in this country is that every single time, if we achieve something, then we're an individual and we stand out, we're exceptional, right? But if one person does something wrong, it gets we all get given responsibility for that, and that's been kind of the problem. So what they'll do is they kind of hold up people, black people who have done exceptional things as individuals, not as the group, but black people who do bad things, they hold them up as representative of the group. And then you have the things like we've been in every single war. We fought in every single war this country has ever been in. But each time, up until Truman integrated the troops, every single time we had to reprove ourselves. So you can look at it, you can find examples of black formations of troops doing exemplary, things in battle, and then the next time, like, I don't know if these darkies can handle combat. That's like, but we just did this one and this one and this one and this one.
Yeah.
And this one,
and mostly that comes from the people in Congress who either never met a black man or more than likely never served. And the one thing I wanted to throw out as it comes to this is something, again, I learned over at Friendly Atheist a couple of days ago. And this is back in 1960, so it's possible that's why I didn't run onto it. Axe Handle Saturday, which is also something that apparently came down in Jacksonville, Florida, sometime in 1960, which was basically a riot and a beating and a bunch of guys, a bunch of white guys wailing a bunch of black guys. And it's, I've been around for a while, and this is the first I ever heard of it. Come on. And meanwhile, DeSantis wants to just wipe black history off the face of Florida, which somebody needs to get in his face and, say, hey, we're talking about freedom of speech here, asshole.
I'll do it. Like I've watched.
This is all just to soothe the egos of older white people. Florida's basically a nursing home. He's just.
Well, the best part about it to me is, is that these are the same ones that they'll wet themselves every time we want to pull down a statue of some Confederate scumfuck because they have to preserve history. But they're very selective about what history they want to preserve.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, and one thing. Well, let me make one point, and then we'll go to Isaiah, who's had his hand up too. I know I've talked a little bit here and there over the last couple of months about how relatively progressive the old Superman radio show was, and how that's been one of my favorite things about listening to it recently. And there was a stretch there. I think the episodes I was listening to when they were doing this were in maybe 1948 was when they were originally being broadcast, and they had a regular thing where during the commercial breaks they would do these public service announcements where the radio announcer would just be speaking directly to the audience and would basically be saying, hey kids, don't be racist, and one of the things they did by way of that was they would give little brief biographical sketches of important people of color in American history who had done significant things. They talked about Crispus Attucks, who was a black man who is often referred to as the first person killed in the American Revolution. And they give a little brief summary of his story, so then the announcer can say to the kids in the audience, so there was a black American all the way back, even when his people were enslaved, all the way back in the birth of our nation, who represented the best of what America is supposed to be and gave his life for the cause. And and it wasn't perfect, but it was an effort. It was a conscious effort to educate the audience to the fact that people other than white people, other than Christians, have been an important part of our society for the entirety of its existence. And that's a good thing. And that's something we should embrace. And we should not, allow feelings of prejudice or stereotyping or scapegoating or whatever to, influence our feelings and our behaviors toward people who are different than us. And it's one of those things where it's it feels surprising when you hear it now and you think, holy, this was the 40s when they were doing this.
Steve,
because
that's
they
worth a video. That is worth a video
because they don't do it anymore. And I think it's one of those things that because things are cyclical, it's both depressing, but also kind of encouraging, because you think, well, if they were doing this shit back in the 40s, surely we can come up with some modern version of it today. You know what I mean? And so it's but just the fact that there was this, and the Superman show was hugely popular, so there were, you know, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of kids every day hearing these messages, and then at a certain point they just kind of stopped getting those messages. You know, somebody finally said, "Nah, stop." You know, the whatever the 1940s or 1950s version of woke was. You know, someone complained about that. Said, "No, stop. No, don't worry about it. Just, you know, sell them candy bars and cigarettes and
Steve,
you know,
I hate
stop
to
worrying
burst
about
your-
it."
I hate to burst your bubble, but I think the reason they stopped doing it is because those parts weren't played in the South, and they just played commercials over them.
That could be true. That could be true
Huh.
too.
That
could be true,
wouldn't
too.
surprise me either. I mean, the South has pulled stunts like that with all sorts of shit.
I mean,
No,
hell,
I mean,
The South ruins everything.
I actually think I know their term for woke back then, but it includes a racial epithet. So I'm not gonna say
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And it's a
Oh,
two-word
yes!
it's a two-word
Yep.
term that ends with lover.
Yes, for
Yeah.
Sid and then Kill the Mockingbird. Yes,
Yeah.
Isaiah.
Yes,
Well,
Isaiah.
yeah. So getting back to Florida, because this is how insidious
Insidious.
There you go.
insidious this whole thing is, because recently the Republican legislator here in Florida passed this anti-Semitic legislation.
Oh, crazy.
So clearly wokeness is fine when it's a group I'm pandering for, but it's not when it's other people who probably won't vote for me.
Right.
So they're basically saying we're going to like stop anti-Semitism, or in their mind, we're going to catch liberals doing anti-Semitism.
Right.
Despite the fact that all the anti-Semitism in Florida is coming from the right, who support DeSantis, but he's like, nah, I don't buy it, because like whenever rich people, Republicans, pass any bills, take it with a massive grain of salt.
Yeah.
Because no, it's basically saying we're going to protect Jewish people because we want their vote, because our nutty religion tells us the world's going to end in Israel somewhere.
But it isn't just that they want their vote; they want their money.
True, there's that. I mean, the fascists love Israel because it's effectively an ethno state, and is definitely against the brown people because of the poor treatment that Palestine has been suffering under for like decades, ever since the creation of Israel. But yet, it's also Jewish people. So some parts of the fascists like hate that it's like the Jewish home for those people. But yet, because of how they treat the brown people, they
that's the thing. You basically, the right wing loves Israel and hates Jews.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like that. It's like the meme. It's like the meme of the guy sweating over which button to push.
Yes, exactly.
You know, it's like, oh, geez. Do I support Israel for being an authoritarian state, or do I hate it because it's run by Jewish people? What do I do? What do I do?
Michael, your hand is up.
Michael's hand's been up. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just going back to, and I'm not calling one out because I'm guilty of this myself. I was just curious on thoughts on what we can kind of do about this sort of thing, where it's like there's this kind of gut reaction that's more of a liberal reaction than a leftist reaction, and I always want to try to be more of a leftist than a liberal. When we talk about the South, especially like Florida, where it's like, oh, it's just a bunch of racist old white people. That's all that's down there, and then we kind of discount it for that. But I've obviously that's not the case. We have a lot of people that are living there that are marginalized, and they have to live there and put up with that shit.
True. Yeah. Exactly.
As opposed to like me sitting here pretty in California.
And what do you call it? Israel's a pretty good example for how to view that, as the problem with Israel isn't the Jews. The problem with Israel is the people that are in charge, and the power structure that puts the people who are in charge, and makes those that are getting some value from the oppression of Palestinians that wouldn't normally support that authoritarianism, gives them reason to support it.
And Joe, that's actually a really good point, because if you think about it, what's screwing things up in Israel? It's the right wing religious fanatics who are basically wanted, like, like Geek said, an ethno state. So they're basically they're the same as the right wing Republicans and fascists here. It's the same idea. They put their extreme version of whatever beliefs they supposedly have in charge, and everybody else is, and that does create friction. And for those of any of you who've actually been related to or part of any way of the Jewish community, there's always been a fight between the ultra orthodox and pretty much everybody else.
Yes, exactly.
And there's a further problem in that as well. Look at how long Bibi Netanyahu has been in power. How long? It's 20 years at least.
A long time.
And I can't remember the last time somebody from the Labor Party, held the prime ministership. Bibi's been there easily 20 years. Israeli government has made a massive move to the right. And made even worse, of course, when Trump decided, we're going to move, the embassy to Jerusalem. And and the thing is, they had that one little brief moment a little ways back when I think it was from the Labor Party was in there. I can't even think of his name. And of course, Netanyahu comes right back in and falls on everything, and they're moving even further to the right. And I basically fault Netanyahu entirely for the peace process falling apart, because when he took over back in the late 90s, his government literally said, well, that treaty we have with the Palestinians, that was with the previous government, that's not binding on us, which of course is bullshit. And then it was Shimon Peres who then got in for a while, and then he was out, and then it's been Netanyahu since. And even though he's been basically found to be a criminal, he's still there. It's terrible. The checks and balances in their government, whatever they may be, are either not getting exercised or they're pretty well in abeyance.
Well, it's the same problem we have here, right? The checks and balances only work if the people who have the power are willing to follow the rules, as we found very shockingly and frighteningly, ourselves in recent years. What I was going to say is, we're talking about Black History Month. And I had an argument back when I don't remember which version of the Breakfast Club channel it was, but in one of them I made a video about it and its origins and everything. And somebody tried to challenge me and said, "Oh, well, should we have a Latin History Month?" And I'm like, "Don't threaten me with a good time, man." Like,
and also, yes, Latin Heritage Month starts at September 15th and ends until October 15th.
And for that matter, we should have an Asian Heritage Month too, because Asians have contributed to this country
and
since the beginning as well. So
it's just like when every year on International Women's Day, there's always some
International Men's Day.
Yes, and it's like there is one. Yeah, it's like why isn't there an International Men's Day? There is one.
It looks like Jacob has something to say.
So I actually have a shout out that I want to do for Black History Month, because I just saw that Elvis is a nominee for Best Picture at the Oscars.
Don't get me started.
Wow, Steve.
I feel like this is a good opportunity to remind you about what a thief Elvis was, not just in the cultural appropriation sense, but as a literal thief, because one of his prominent songwriters was a Black musician named Otis Blackwell, but he only got half the royalties for the songs he wrote for Elvis. Elvis took the other half, basically just for recording it, and Blackwell basically had no recourse to it, because when he tried to protest it to Elvis's management team, they said, "What are you going to do? Record it yourself?"
Well, I'll look at it this way.
Elvis's management wasn't particularly good.
I will quote. I'm not often to quote Public Enemy in part because of their anti-Semitism, but in this particular case, I'll say, Elvis, that sucker was simple and plain. Motherfuck him and John Wayne.
Seconded.
By the way, there is an Asia, America, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. It is May.
Yay!
All right. Learn something new every day.
The John Wayne thing. occasionally, I'm on Facebook groups that make fun of right-wing postings on Facebook, and like there's one where it's like, be like John Wayne, not a snowflake, or something stupid like that. I'm like, oh yeah, John Wayne was such not a snowflake that when the Native American woman was allowed to speak at the academy, he practically, they had to hold him back from charging the stage. Because God fucking forbid. Not a snowflake like John fucking Wayne.
And he said explicitly that he was a white supremacist.
Yes.
Never mind the fact that he was one of damn few, heavyweights in Hollywood at that time who did not serve in World War II.
Ironically.
And there's some story there's some conflicting stories about why that was too. Like John Wayne always said, afterwards, like, well, I was too old. The army. And I have heard other versions of it, and who knows what the truth is.
Yeah, Jimmy Stewart wasn't too old.
Cary Grant.
A bunch of movie stars from the 40s served in World War II. And some of whom actually served, like actually flew combat missions, or like they weren't just doing USO shows, like they were actually in the army doing army
Stewart was
shit.
a Liberator driver, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Well, Ted Williams.
Ted Williams.
Ted Williams missed like 5 years total of his career because he served in World War II and the Korean War.
Imagine look at what his stats were, his career stats were. Imagine what they would have been if he didn't miss 5 years. But one thing I want to say too about John Wayne is, for all the people who tilt nipples to John Wayne, who seem to have a problem and they always dead name trans people. That if you don't call him Marion, because that's what his birth certificate is.
Marion Morrison.
Marion Morrison.
Exactly. But if you somehow are able to find yourself to be able to call him John Wayne because he changed his name, then you should give the same respect to everybody else, regardless of why they changed their name, including Muhammad Ali, and stop calling him Cassius Clay.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, we all call him.
And the thing about people who don't call him Muhammad Ali, I mean, I guess if you're making a documentary about him and you're specifically referring to a point in his life where he was still Cassius Clay, I guess I can let you off the hook for that.
Sure.
But if you're talking about him just as a historical figure or an athlete now, and you're still calling him Cassius Clay, it's like, he beat somebody's ass for that, like on TV.
Yes.
There was like his first major fight after he changed his name. The famous moment where he's like punching the guy and saying, "What's my name?"
That was Joe Frazier. I'm pretty certain.
Was it Joe? What? No,
I'm pretty sure it was Smoking Joe.
So I've been.
But anyway, I mean, it's like I think he made his feelings on the matter pretty clear, that what he wanted to be called.
I've been keeping mostly quiet, probably to be polite and let you guys talk about like actually important shit. Also, partly because I have a bit of a headache, but I do have a couple things to say. Okay, so it's funny, Steve. You one of your recent Star Trek videos talked about like the inner light, and I had just seen that episode for the first time, like the other day before that. I'm like, oh, okay. So the thing that filled me with existential dread in that episode was when I guess I could say Picard, but I'll say Kamen's daughter, because I assumed Kamen was a real guy and Picard was just role playing him essentially. When his daughter noted that there was no bacteria left in the soil, I'm like, oh,
that's not good.
The sun's radiation. I'm like, that's when there's no saving the planet. Oh god, that's worse than climate change.
Yes.
When there's no microbes left, that's the basis of every food chain.
And by the way, Sirius just put it in our Zoom chat. It was Ernie Terrell who Ali was fighting.
Terrell was a real asshole too.
So I had to say,
Anyway, go ahead.
Something I'm noticing lately, Worf seems like he would be one of my favorite people to hang out with. I know that seems strange because he's a Klingon and you think he's all about, but no, most of the time he's very quiet and respectful.
Yeah,
it just kind of goes along with.
Well,
go ahead.
Nick, you brought up something that I just posted about yesterday, the day before. I've come to the conclusion that the Klingons in Next Gen and later are a proxy, or effectively it's a variation on the Noble Savage theme.
And I saw you post that on Facebook.
And somebody challenged me on that and said, well, but in the Noble Savage thing, there's always that one Savage who's better than the others. I'm like, that's Worf.
He was raised with us.
No, I did notice that. But I like when his Klingon side shows the more poetic elements of Klingon society. Someone brought up in like one of Steve's recent videos that if anything, the Klingons of the Next Generation seem like a caricature of the Klingons in the original series.
Yes.
That if anything, Worf behaves more like a classical Klingon.
Yeah.
Well, keep in mind, you haven't understood Shakespeare until you've read it in the original Klingon.
Yes. And see, it's stuff like that. And I think part of it is that I did sort of like, I grew up on Next Generation. So even though the first Star Trek I ever saw was the movies, like, you know, I really, Next Gen started when I was 7 and I watched it all the way through to the end. So I grew up on TNG. So those are the Klingons that I really sort of, you know, that's kind of what I think of initially in my head when I think, oh, Klingons, right? And they are kind of
called out. Sorry, I feel so called out. Like, oh, I only like Worf because he's the whitest Klingon.
Like so because of that, I think I have always felt like Klingons, in terms of like Klingon culture, if you're going to like dive into like what's their culture like, what's it like in their if you just live in the Empire, I've always felt that stuff works better when it's played for a laugh, because that's kind of how it is on TNG. They're sort of caricatures. It's like it's all about honor and war and battle, and it's so over the top. And it's like, how did these people ever make it into space? You know, so that's kind of my natural you know, instinct to go with, because Worf is the only one who seems like he has any kind of versatility at all.
Like it's basically what happened in Warhammer. It's like humanity went to space and then they became brutal.
I read a really interesting blog
like
about that. They were talking about the that the Klingons in the TNG era, particularly in TNG itself, they speculated that, of course, this is, you know, just fanon, but that they were having a right-wing resurgent backlash thing where they were, you know, calling back to their manhood in their old society, because they felt that they had been neutered as a culture because of the events that led them to getting into peace with the Federation.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Societally, that they had regressed because they were trying to seem tougher than they actually.
And
you know,
in the first season of Discovery, they kind of explicitly did that. Like that was the Klingon, that was the motivation for the Klingon Federation War in season 1 of Discovery, was the Klingons, like they're sort of absolutist, you know, nationalist factions within the Klingon Empire rising to power and calling all the other factions together and saying, you know, this Federation shit is diluting us and making us weak. We need to be Klingons. We need to be strong.
Like, I just need to be.
I like when they would
clear.
show, like in TNG, and I think it was one of the movies, you show the Klingons that aren't the warrior people, and they would talk about, like, you know, we're not all warriors. Like, literally, it couldn't work if we were all warriors.
Right.
But, you know, the current, you know, political movement is putting us all down. Like, they don't need scientists and lawyers and shit. You know, when you see the Klingon scientists.
Interesting point, too, as it comes to that. We've actually seen a Ferengi scientist. We saw that in one of the TNG episodes where they were talking about, I believe it's the metaphasic shields.
Yeah, Dr. Rega.
We have we ever seen a Klingon scientist? You know?
Yes, that's what I was talking about.
I'm sorry.
Was he? Well, one thing though, that one thing I realized about where things changed, like Krug in Star Trek 3 was like the last of the classic Klingons. So he had, he had the look of the new Klingons, but he had the behavior of the old Klingons. You know, they're kind of, you know, they're conniving and they are hostile, and they use very much of like a lot of like Soviet and Nazi rhetoric of like, well, we need room to breathe kind of space, you know, kind of thing. And they kind of actually kept that with not Gorkon, with Admiral
Chang, Star Trek 6.
Yeah, but the interesting thing though with the next gen ones is that they kind of took what was really the Romulan basis, because if you think about Balance of Terror and both the Balance of Terror and the Enterprise incident, The Romulans are very martial. Their society is basically very much like the Romans. It's like we're built around constant warfare, constant conquest. Yeah, or the Spartans or something like that. So they're very militaristic. But the thing is, though, is they were not like sleazy. They basically, they were very duty bound. And it wasn't war. They weren't like enjoying. It wasn't like where they made the Klingons like, yes, battle. They were more. It was more of like, no, this is our way. We conquer. We're the Romulans. This is what we do. But then they turned the Romulans into like sneaky and conniving, and I think it's because of the cloak. Although the Klingons have the cloak too. So, but they gave that warlike nature of the Romulans to the Klingons.
You can explain that in Kant with the Watsonian explanation as opposed to the Doyleist explanation is that the Tal Shiar kind of overexerted their influence over Romulan government, and so everything kind of took on that. Everyone's a backstabber all of a sudden in their society.
Yeah.
So I'm
well,
sorry,
you can kind of get away with it. You can get away with it, by saying that like we only see the Romulans a little tiny bit in classic Trek. They're really only in a handful of episodes, and then they pop up like once or twice in the movies in really unimportant roles, and then they don't really become like an ongoing antagonist again until really
Deep Space Nine.
Well, TNG. They're in TNG, but they appear right at the very end of the first season of TNG, and then they kind of recur after that. So for us, as the audience, there's like a long stretch where we don't see anything about the Romulans, and in the fiction, there's like supposedly something like 100 years where there's a silence where the Federation and the Romulans aren't speaking to each other. So there's room to sort of do a reset. And it's like, oh, now the Romulans are like this because it's been a while and there have been some changes. Right. But you're right. I mean, the Klingons and the Romulans do kind of flip,
You have to wonder whether or not, there was actually anything genuinely spelled out in whatever original series or TNG Star Trek Bible was actually spelled about who are the Klingons, who are the Romulans, actually spell out, the fundamentals of the culture. Because I mean, it's basically sort of running any direction that an individual writer wants to take them.
Well, if you think about it, it's an episodic television show that a lot of times they're not with a lot of communication. There's sometimes where it seems that they just need an enemy, and it could be either Klingons or Romulans. They're just like, all right, we did a Romulan episode last week, we'll just do Klingons this time.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't count for obviously the Klingon-centric episodes of the Romulan. But it's like, hey, there's a thing in the neutral zone. There's some kind of space widget,
Well, and remember too, a big reason why they even brought the Romulan back is that they failed to make the Ferengi a credible enemy.
Exactly. Yeah, the Ferengi were pretty weak.
Yeah, the Ferengi, I think, only really works the punchline rather than the element.
Okay, I just needed to say, I've been slowly building up an anxiety attack here for 10 minutes. I just need to say, like, why I like Worf. And it's not because of the noble savage.
I didn't Nick.
Look,
go ahead, Nick.
As an autistic person, I appreciate when people are direct and plain spoken. I appreciate minimalism, where people don't fluff up their speech with flowery metaphors or euphemisms. That's why I like Data so much. And it's why I feel like I can relate more to, or at least I could understand Worf more than almost anybody else if I was on the Enterprise, as is the case with like the normal people that I know in real life. I feel like I could talk to Worf and he would be very direct with me. That's why I like Worf.
Oh yeah, and Nick, to be clear, I would never ever, if for an instant, believe that you would like Worf because he was the whitest Klingon. Believe me, I would never think that about you. Just want you to make sure you understand that. Because the same thing. I identify with Spock, and I always have, because I'm a mixed race person growing up in the 70s, and there was Spock, who was just like me, who was resented by both sides and only really fit in that on the ship, So
I would trust Worf more than I would trust most people because he just tell me something to my face.
Right.
I also kind of appreciate how he is different and he kind of has to mask as a human, not in the way that Data does, but still, performatively a little bit. Like he has to tone himself down to make everybody else comfortable.
And that's why I feel
a bit of that too. Any Klingon, would it still be Worf?
If what?
Have dinner with any Klingon, would it still be Worf?
I don't know.
whitest Klingon. Just saying.
Nick, mind you, I relate to Worf for the same reason, because again, that's very much like the Spock thing, right? Because he's a man of two worlds. He's born Klingon, but he grew up in Federation society, and he does have to meter himself. He can't be who he might want to be.
Oh my
He
goodness.
has to fit in, and I relate to that as well.
Yeah, I appreciate him from an autistic perspective.
After this conversation,
the reason that because they kind of build it up over the one of the few times that Worf gets character development instead of staying static, is he kind of develops a friendship with Data over the seasons. You think again, this is in canon versus just out of real life explanations, but you think in canon that Worf's directness is kind of like why him and Data kind of form that friendship and get along, because Data doesn't pick up on subtlety and
well, they're also kind of outsiders commenting on humanity.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That Worf and Data are the outside. Worf and Data are the outsiders.
Oh, okay, that too.
Yeah.
Well, I think that like Gene Roddenberry came up with Data and Worf because he split Spock into like two different characters. Spock was the outside observer to humans from an alien's perspective and a Logic's perspective. So the Logic perspective became Data, and the alien perspective became Worf as Worf. Just like how Riker, Picard and Riker is Kirk as Worf.
Yeah.
Gene Roddenberry split off like the captain from Kirk to be Picard, and then the womanizer of Kirk to be Riker as well.
I have to. One thing I want to say real quick. I just watched Nepenthe last night, and just the good episode. Just to see Picard and Riker and Deanna, and just to see, at the risk of sounding soppy, just the love that was there, just the enormous camaraderie and the depth of the relationship that was there. I mean, I could watch that all day.
Yeah,
it just
I know a lot of it.
Hand around Picard, or the other way around. It was so cute.
I know a lot of it.
They were just
I know a lot of it was the actors, because the TNG actors are close in real life. But yeah, I mean, that episode of Picard, like I said, I mean, there were other episodes in the first season that were all right, but the Nepenthe episode of Picard is the only one that I look at and I think that was actually like a good episode. And because they seem like they are genuinely friends. It's people. It's like, oh, look, human beings who actually care about each other. Where's this been for this entire show up until this point? And they just. It seems. I've said before, like the moment that I realized that I loved Deep Space Nine was when I realized that I believed that these characters were actually friends and they really cared about each other. And when you get that feeling from fictional characters, we're like, oh, it seems like they really are friends. It seems like the show isn't just telling us, oh, these two are best friends. Like, no, it really comes across. It feels like they really care about each other. And when Riker, sees Picard for the first time in Nepenthe, and he, like turns around from the sink and goes, oh man, and like walks up and hugs. It's like, it feels real. It feels like these are two real people who really like each other, and they haven't seen each other for a while.
And then later on, when they're sitting by the lake and they're talking about well, where are we going from here, that whole conversation just resonates with me. There was just it was very real. It was very from the heart. It was what it should have been, and nothing less than that.
After Isaiah used his hand raised, I have something completely unrelated to bring up a foot.
Okay, go Isaiah.
So I've been sick for the past few days.
That's good.
You're right.
Excuse me. So I think it was yesterday, we had the anniversary of Challenger.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I made out of an old motorcycle helmet that I got from I want to say eBay. I made a vintage NASA
oh, cool.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
That's very cool.
That is very nice.
You can actually wear it.
As one of the few people on the panel that was alive when the Challenger incident happened, I very much appreciate that.
Yeah.
That is seriously cool.
That's really cool.
And yeah, I still remember I was going out to McDonald's, and I heard somebody say, the Challenger exploded. I said, what? And I come home and I get it verified, and it just, you want to talk about an event that just colored your whole day. I remember calling into a local talk show and saying, absolutely, we need to keep going with this, because the one thing among many things that I feel like the space program does for us is it provides us with inspiration, with throwing down the gauntlet and saying, this is something that we can do. It's difficult, it's dangerous, but it's absolutely something we need to do. The tragedy is that they forced that flight. And that pisses the daylights out of me.
Oh yeah, there's a really good documentary about it on Netflix that is just enraging.
The one where they have Feynman come in and and Feynman does the analysis on it, and Feynman just basically throws down, he started out being something of a skeptic. He starts going down some of the wrong directions, but he picks up on it and he drills it.
Yeah. I mean, I was in high school at the time, and I remember I was in gym when it came over the PA system. Because first I heard someone said, someone came in and said the space shuttle blew up, and of course, being the geek I am, I'm like, which one? I didn't know which orbiter it was. But then and I was thinking that can't be, and then they came over the PA, and we were just all blown away. And I just remember it was probably like 6 period out of an 8 period day, and I remember the rest of the day we were all just sullen, and it was like no one was doing any schoolwork. We are just like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened.
I was 5, and it's the first national tragedy that I remember. And I was
what year was it?
86, I believe.
86.
Yeah, early 86.
I remember it myself. I was like 4 or 5.
Yeah, I was 5 years old, and I was already like a space kid. You know what I mean? Like, I loved the space program. I already knew about the Mercury program and Gemini and Apollo, and I loved the space shuttle, and so it was just horrible. And I mean, I remember watching Reagan's speech on TV that night, and it was just the worst thing that had ever happened.
When Columbia happened, I remember that clearly.
It's weird. I don't have any memories of the Challenger explosion itself, like watching it or the immediate aftermath. But what I weirdly remember, because it might have been that I just got into space shortly after, like them talking, like the audience or the commentary about, that having happened when the next shuttle left, that sort of talk, the gloom it put on the space program.
I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again real quick, because I know a lot of people who were in school at the time were actually watching the Challenger launch when it happened, because Kristen McAuliffe was on board. My school, we were not actually watching it. I guess I must have been a kindergartner at that point. I would have been halfway through my first year of kindergarten, because I turned 6 in 86. But yeah, so we weren't actually watching it. But about a year and a half later, when they resumed the shuttle program, we watched that launch. And we were all like in the cafeteria of my elementary school, and the TVs were on, and we were all watching it live. And I remember our principal, Mr. Price, who I despise to this day, not just for this, for a lot of reasons. He was just a prick. But so we were watching it, and Mr. Price is up there in the front of the room, standing by one of the TVs. And when they get to the point, the shuttle takes off, everything's good. It was the Discovery, I think, was the shuttle that launched after the first launch after Challenger. I think it was the Discovery.
Sounds right.
And so it clears the tower. It's going up into the sky. Everything's going exactly the way it should. And then they get to the point with the booster separation, which is where Challenger exploded because of the bad.
Actually, it was before. It was only 75 seconds in.
No, that's right. It wasn't quite the booster separation.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
but
it was throttle up.
It was at that point, right? And
Yeah.
they were about to do, the booster separation. And Mr. Price says, pointing at the TV and looking at this room full of children, he says, "All right, pay attention. This is where it blew up last time."
Oh, geez.
And even at like age 7, I was sitting there. I'm like 7 years old, 6 or 7 years old, however old I was. I think I might have been 7 by that point. But I'm like, even at that age, I'm like thinking, you fucking idiot.
Right.
Like, who says that to a room full of elementary school children who, who are
sounds
some
like
of
your
whom
principal was Michael Scott.
he was
Right?
horrible. No, Michael Scott was actually was capable of being likable and seemed to be good at one or two things. Mr. Price was just a fucking complete loss as a human being. And you know what was great? My dad had him when he was in school as a shop teacher. My dad fucking hated him. My dad fucking hated him too. It was great. It was like this thing that we could bond over. It's like, wait a minute, Mr. Price. I forget his first name, but like so and so Price. I'm like, yeah. I had him as a shop teacher in high school. Oh God, I hate that guy. I was like, it was so great.
But one thing that would really hit our town hard when that happened is like, the elementary schools had all been built in the late 60s, all within a year of each other, and they were all named after the
astronauts.
Yeah. So you had the Mercury 7. We were all named after the Mercury 7. And mine was Schirra. I actually met Wally Schirra because what what the district actually did, they went and got all for each of the schools that were whoever their namesake was, if they were still alive, they went and got them to come to the school to visit the school.
Oh, awesome.
And so we were really, really big. So the whole town and the whole school system was really big on promoting the space program. And I think there were some people watching the launch that day.
Yeah.
Because again, it was a big part of the district because we all grew up with the Mercury 7, right? It was the thing is, and then it makes me think too of when Columbia was destroyed, and I remember too that was a couple years after 9/11, and I remember the first thought was this terrorism, was this sabotage or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and Columbia was, again, just like Challenger, Columbia was, I think, a full crew. I mean, I think there were 7 or 8.
That was 7 people.
7 people. I mean, and it was, that was the one. That was 2003, and I remember that happened while I was out. I was out shopping or visiting with friends or something, and I came home and turned on the TV, and that's what I saw. And I was like, "Oh, Jesus Christ!" Again. And it's even worse because not only because it's 7 people, but it was the Columbia. It was the first one. I mean, like the first space shuttle, and now it's gone. And I mean, and the shuttle program was in trouble at that point anyway, because, NASA didn't have the budget and there wasn't the political will to start transitioning into whatever the next thing would be. So they were, running the shuttle fleet longer than they should have. And it was just awful. It was just awful.
Okay, we're about to end the show, but Nick Anderson has been waiting for his phone. He said he wanted to get that point after Isaiah's his thing, and we went on the channel. So
sorry,
actually, I meant to bring this up half an hour ago. So I'm only gonna take 2 minutes. I saw the fish people.
Yes,
so you don't have to. It's not perfect. It is a little too long, and there are a couple of missed opportunities. They didn't anyway. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I thought the first act was basically flawless. It's just oozing with tension. A man crushes his own skull in disgust. It's actually Shakespearean. Second act, it's a little more plotting. It's just showing people living their lives so we can appreciate what's at stake. Third act is all action. Again, goes on a little long. But it's a much smaller scale than the big battle of the first movie, so it feels more personal and dirty. It just devolves into this revenge tug of war. But overall, I thought it was really solid. And I thought the dialogue was better than the first movie. I didn't mind the first movie's dialogue, but every other line read like a catchphrase, which you could just say is the sign of a tightly written, efficient script. But here, there's a lot more people just shooting the shit, especially the kids. People often get annoyed by kid characters, but they were my favorite thing in the movie. Anytime, these children who grew up together under bizarre circumstances were just goofing off or teasing, I love that. I want more of that. I want them to become the main characters. The only thing I thought was really lame was how they handled the one human kid, where Neytiri hates him at the start of the movie and she hates him at the end of the movie. Nobody grew from that. Nothing changed. I guess they're saving it for another movie. Anyway, I thought it was very, very good. The thing that still screws me up is how people are like, oh, these movies have no cultural impact because nobody makes memes about them. Memes don't count for shit. We just saw Sony assume that because people made memes about Morbius, that meant they wanted to see it. They re-released it because of memes.
Gotcha.
Well, I mean, I might have liked to have seen it if it wasn't obvious it was going to suck.
Yeah,
I still haven't seen it myself. I'm looking forward to it.
I haven't seen Avatar: The Fish People movie Part 2. I'm glad that you liked it, Nick, and other people who I've seen who like on social media and stuff who have watched it seem to have enjoyed it. So I think that's cool. It doesn't really interest me. I'm probably not going to see it, but I bet if I did see it, I would like it more than I liked Elvis. So at least there's that. At least there's that.
There's one. I don't plan to see Avatar either, but there's one thing I'm glad about it.
Yeah,
because I'm tired of all the people who are going off about like, well, superhero fatigue and basically making the point that superhero movies are somehow preventing other movies from being shown. Well, Avatar is not a superhero movie, and it's making billions. So fuck all you, superhero fatigue bullshit asshole people. If you don't want to see superhero movies, don't go watch them.
Well, yeah.
Marvel makes like 3 movies a year. You can't tell me 3 movies are blocking all the others.
And also,
I just want to say, I experienced a little bit of superhero fatigue because I've now seen these characters dozens of times. There's only been 2 Avatar movies. I'm not tired of them yet. But once they release like 7 more, then I'll get sick of them.
No one ever. You ever hear someone talk about police procedural fatigue or mystery fatigue or cowboy fatigue or any other thing,
Well, they hate it because it's popular.
Reality show.
The other
I've
thing
just
is
been
reality show.
I've just been going back through the old season 3 of the original Law and Order and the introduction of Lenny Briscoe and Jerry Orbach, who is just wonderful in that. And I am enjoying the living daylights out of that. In fact, I'm picking up on the newer Law and Order. And I'll tell you what, the writers aren't dropping a stitch. The writing is still top notch.
Nice.
I watched. Speaking of which, I watched just a couple weeks ago when I was looking for a movie to not recommend for late seating. I watched Universal Soldier for the first time in years. I think I saw it back in the 90s when it first came out. And in the middle of it, out of nowhere, fucking Jerry Orbach. There he is. It's like, oh, hey, Jerry Orbach. No kidding. I forgot he was in this.
Oh, good.
But yeah,
probably the best part of the movie.
Yeah. But what Serious Mind was saying about like superhero fatigue, like, I mean, I guess I get it. Like, I've never really felt it, but my question is to everybody who complains and says, oh, why is it all superhero movies? Are you going to see movies that aren't superhero movies? Like, are you voting with your dollar? And if you see a movie that isn't a superhero movie that looks good, are you going to the theater to see it? Are you watching it on Netflix? Are you renting it when it comes out on streaming? Like, are you sending the message that more of these movies should be made too? Or are you just going on Twitter and pissing and moaning about it?
Yeah,
I don't really complain about it.
Go to any single movie that A24 publishes.
But I realize, like, one thing I remember talking about this when I was in art school, and I was like, why don't people do writers in Hollywood not have any original ideas? And like my professor who had worked in the industry is like, well, no, it's not that at all. It's that the people who approve those ideas have no original ideas.
Yes.
They just want to approve things that have already been done, what they see is doing well. So, I'm sure there's a ton of writers who want to write all kinds of interesting movies out there.
Of course,
but the executives are like, well, we're doing superhero movies right now.
Don't go attack the vacuum cleaner.
And like, it's fine, but
If we expand what we mean by movies, because like if somebody's complaining about there's not enough like entertainment that's not superhero related, like have you seen Netflix and Hulu and like there is so much out there that just doesn't happen to be shown in theaters.
My poor
so
dog
much
is
stuff.
my poor dog is panicking because she hears a vacuum cleaner downstairs.
Oh dear.
She wants to go fight it. Console her.
That is a handsome puppy dog.
Well, that is an awesome, especially awesome dog because like most dogs, if they're afraid, they run from it. But like there's certain dogs that are like, I'm gonna challenge this thing. And like my dog Blitzen, who some of you remember way back.
Remember Blitzen very well.
Wait, the first time she experienced thunder and lightning, and she was only 6 months old, and she was like 8 pounds, and she ran around to the house to every single room, huffing, trying to warn off the thunder to leave her house. Damn it!
Get out of here! Okay, Azalea, you have your hand up real quick, and then I'm ending the show.
I feel like a lot of executives don't understand what I'd consider to be like a axiom for any kind of artist or art, which is you can't recreate magic. You know, something really works. You can't just put all the same things in a bottle and make it work again. You know, and they think that they perpetually think that that's what's going to get the money. Is like, oh, if we do exactly what we did with this one thing that was totally groundbreaking, it'll gross as much money, and it usually doesn't, because you can't put lightning in a bottle, or I mean, you can't, whatever the metaphor is.
Video game companies been doing it all the time. They wanted like that with Call of Duty is big. They want their own Call of Duty, but no, if people already have Call of Duty, they're not going to play your game because they have Call of Duty. So they're not going to play the WoW killer because they have WoW. They
always somehow forget that whatever the hot thing is now, that was groundbreaking at one point. It was new. It wasn't just doing the same thing that they were doing before. They were, like Star Wars is, incredibly familiar now, but in 1977, Star Wars felt brand new.
Yeah, it was a problem with computer games for the last 40 years, as I've experienced them for 40 plus years, and now it's a problem with mobile games, right?
Yeah.
There's every game. There's all the Candy Crush variations, and then now it's the one where you have to kill the thing and it makes your guy bigger, and then they kill the next one and makes your blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Raid Shadow Legends. By the way,
the falling spikes.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to wrap this up, everybody. As always,
Steve, what do you have upcoming on next week on your channel?
Funny you should ask. So tomorrow I have a video going up that I'm really happy with. It is a rant that I wrote about Chick-fil-A and right-wing identity politics that I'm just very pleased about. So that goes up tomorrow. Wednesday, I have another video coming out about an episode of MacGyver. It's the most depressing episode of MacGyver they ever made. So I'm looking forward to talking about that.
You mean the final episode?
No, not the final episode. Although the final episode of MacGyver is not great, but it's fun. MacGyver. Hey, guess what? MacGyver has a long lost son. Didn't see that coming, did you? But anyway,
my joke is because it was ending.
Because it was the end. Because no more. He puts his Swiss Army knife away for the last time. And then also on Wednesday evening, my time, Dana and I are doing, we do Trek Reluctantly every week, where we alternate between watching Deep Space Nine, and now we're watching Agatha Christie's Poirot on the off weeks when we're not watching Deep Space Nine. And this week we're watching Deep Space Nine, and we're watching my favorite episode of Star Trek ever, The Visitor. And I keep telling Dana that there's no pressure, that if she doesn't like the episode, that's okay. But I feel like she's still feeling some pressure. So
I will think less of you, but it'll be okay.
I will think less of you silently. It won't change the way we interact.
It might not live up to the hype, though. But that's
I will quietly judge you. I will quietly judge you.
I like hearing Dana's criticisms because they're often things I would not have thought of.
Yeah.
I like hearing dissenting voices. So
exactly.
Especially when they're coming from someone who I otherwise get along with or appreciate their opinion on stuff.
I'm sorry, but did we already stop recording while I?
I'm just about to. So hey, speaking of which, thanks for the cue, Nick.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Anyway, so thanks to everybody here for being here and for being patrons or members. I really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody watching.
Ask away on Friday as well.
Yes, ask away on Friday. Ask away this Friday.
Azalea.
And hang on a second. Let me end the goddamn show before you start talking. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll do this again. We'll do this again next month. Bye everybody.